following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Bronx Roots with David Hubler. I'm Ralph Tyko, and David the Star is here to introduce a guest. How are you, David? And
okay.
What you got for us?
Well, today our special guest is Michael Preminger, stand-up comic, screenwriter, and a long-time personal friend of mine. A long time. So we go back, between the two of us, we're talking about 150 years, I think.
Wow.
But
did you guys really grow up together in the Bronx?
Yes, yeah, oh yeah. We don't lie on this show, you know. And Michael.
Well, I was born in Montana, but then I moved when I was about a year and a half. But I still have horses around the house.
You parked the horses on Pelham Parkway, right?
Marshalloo Parkway.
Right.
Marshalloo. Okay.
And I just wanted to make this, before Mike and I begin to talk, I would just, you know, you laugh about the horses, but there was a horse stable up at the very end of the Jerome Avenue line, across the street from the entrance to Van Cortlandt Park. And I remember it distinctly because those horses were taken and used for horseback riding in the park. But I distinctly remember one time, I don't know, Mike, you may have even remembered this too, the stable burned down. And
I don't remember.
A number of horses
actually
died. You were out of town checking on your horses. Yeah, and a number of horses died in this fire, and the smell of the burning horse flesh was pretty pungent for a good few days. Anyway, so that's the story about horses in the Bronx.
Wow.
Very short and not so sweet story, but we go.
How did you guys meet? How did you guys first meet? Do you remember?
Mike?
Junior high school 80.
Yes. We all went to the same junior high school, even though Mike and I went to different elementary schools. And we all were fed into this one junior high school. And that's where we met. And it would be the 7th grade. And most of us actually hung around the schoolyard and played basketball and things like that, and just hung out.
Hung out, and then across the street from the school was a fence, as we called it. And we would sit on the fence and look at all the girls and wonder, what do we do now? We know
yes.
And they would look back and wonder the same thing, Michael. I'm sure.
Exactly. But that's what we did for years. I mean, we would go home for dinner, but then we'd come back, play basketball, and go across the street.
And look.
Right?
And look. Yeah, and look. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a candy store that you hung at?
No, because there were so many candy stores in the area. Around the corner from me, there were two, one that faced each other across the street. It was the Parkway. We hung out on the Parkway.
Right. You have
and
the
Mike,
poster?
I do have the poster. Mike, tell us that story, because you went to the reunion. I was out in Los Angeles, strangely enough, when they held it. But you went back.
Yes, it was in 1982, and it was a reunion of the Parkway, not the school so much.
Right.
People who hung out over the many, many years at the Parkway, and hundreds and hundreds of people showed up and looked at each other and went, what happened? And
who are you?
Yeah, who were you?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, people that you saw and go, hi, this is my 20-year-old son or something. Because I didn't marry till late, about 10:30. And then, so there was a lot of people, and this poster depicted all the stores that were in that immediate area in the Bronx, and songs from the 50s and artists. And at the bottom it said, I forgot her first name, but it was Gary Marshall's and Penny Marshall's mother had a dance
Marjorie
studio.
Marshall.
Marjorie, thank you. In the bottom of the building that they grew up in, and so that it showed some tap shoes. It's a great poster. It was a great reunion.
Was Carl Reiner's kid there? Wasn't Rob Reiner from your neighborhood as well?
Well, I think they moved to the suburbs. That's why when Carl Reiner wrote the Dick Van Dyke Show, it took place in New Rochelle, which is, I think, is where they moved. But originally, they may have lived in that neighborhood.
They lived in that big building where the concourse meets Marshall Parkway. That big, as apartment buildings went, this was like, the largest apartment building in the area. They
and all the men in that building were bald. It was very strange.
Yes, by 15. They had a barber on the ground level, but he went broke.
Was his name Shimon? And I'm being serious now.
No.
You guys remember a barber named Shimon? Because my grandparents lived up there on Valentine Avenue. And Shimon was a landsman of my grandfather from Shmilovitz in Russia. And he settles as a barber in the Bronx and cut my hair when I was a little kid. So I don't know if you remember that name.
No, all the barbers I knew, those that were all Italian.
Right.
The Italians had the barber concession and the shoemaking concession. The Jews had the bakeries.
Good bakeries. But Schmilowitz is, ironically, the name we were going to give my son, but we thought better of it.
Well, no, you reduced it to a smaller name. Schmilovinsky, you made it. Okay. How did you get into comedy, Michael? I did comedy in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, yeah, where?
California. I was, pardon me?
Where?
I was at the Holy City Zoo in San Francisco, and
the zoo?
They called it the Holy City Zoo.
Oh, well, that was your first
where
mistake.
Robin Williams came up.
Oh.
And if you get out to Northern California, it's a famous comedy club. How did you start in the business, and what were your Bronx roots that brought you to comedy?
Well, the Bronx route, I always loved comedy. I just found things very humorous. For instance, there were always four ladies sitting in front of the building where I grew up, and it could be a hurricane, and trees would be moved, and buildings swayed, and these four ladies sat right out front of the building and asked you, what's your mother making for dinner, and when are you going to get married? I was 11 at the time. And they drove my brother crazy. This is true. They would ask him, what do you want to do when you grow up? He said, be a lawyer. And then when he became a lawyer, they said, what do you want to do? He said, I am a lawyer. And I just found things very funny. And I got into comedy because I was working at NBC I had a nothing job. And I dreamed about comedy, so I went into my boss. True story. I said, I'm leaving. I'm giving my 2 weeks notice, and he said to me, can you leave this afternoon? It's a true story. He said, we'll pack your desk for you. They liked me, but they knew I wasn't doing anything. And I went to Greenwich Village. I knew nothing like where to go, and I forget how I found a place called Champagne Gallery. I know this has nothing to do with the Bronx, actually. But
it doesn't have to be. You get your attitude from the Bronx. You take it with you wherever you go.
True. That's true.
But didn't you go home at night to the Bronx or did you move right into the village?
No, I didn't move into the village. I would go there at night to look for clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a place, Champagne Gallery, it was called, where you went downstairs. You literally went down. And I remember seeing this one comedian, so-called comedian, about 50, and he was doing just terrible old jokes, but there was a table of 4 guys who were just laughing hysterically. Now, later I realized it was just his friends. And I thought, but it took me a month of going there before I had the nerve to ask if I could go on stage. And I did a routine about working as a page at NBC, and also about I also did a routine about going to elevator school to study to be an elevator operator. and there was a guy in the audience who thought it was very funny, and he introduced me to his girlfriend, who was a beautiful girl. She had been a Miss Israel. And I said, that's interesting because I used to date Miss Bronx. And he said, really? I said, well, not exactly Miss Bronx, Miss Gun Hill Road. Well, not really Miss Gun Hill Road. She was voted the prettiest girl in my building. Well, not my building, on my floor.
The floor.
The 5th floor. She was the prettiest girl. And he's laughing, and we became instant friends, and that was David Brenner.
Oh, wow. A comedian's comedian.
Yeah. And we became instant friends. And then finally, after months, I went up to the improvisation and also was afraid to go on. But finally, after many weeks, I did go on, and that's where it really started for me.
Well, tell me more about David Brenner. I know that he gave up an incredibly successful career. He was in the heart of it, and he went through a custody battle with an ex-wife. And,
yes. Let's see. I don't know all the details. He had worked at Channel 5, I think it was, in New York. Maybe he started out in Philadelphia, where he's from. Then he did documentaries, even maybe won some awards for Channel 5 in New York, but then decided he wanted to be a comic. And, boy, was he successful. And then there was a while he had a son with this woman, and the divorce proceedings and the custody, he couldn't leave New York for quite a while because by court order. It was a horrible situation. It was really bad, but
And he passed away at a very young age, just a year or two ago.
Well, I think it was in 2014 now, as a matter of fact. And it was, he was, 78 actually. He had lied about his age.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. So he was born in 36.
He was older than...
No. He was born in 19, so that would have made him 78, right?
Yeah, had he lived.
Yeah.
Or
had he lived, he would have been older.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's very true. I guess just throwing in a had he lived there doesn't really work all the time, you know?
No. It's like somebody says, I've lived all my life in Cleveland. You say, well, not yet.
That's soon enough.
That's funny. We were talking, David and I were talking to David about junior high school 80 and how the school now is having hard times, shall we say.
To say the least. Yeah, we have wonderful stories about going to... It was sort of like Sing Sing South when we went there. Because, with little kids instead of hardened criminals,
Yeah, and they treated us like criminals. And
they really did.
When we look back, we were the most innocent little guys.
That's so true. That's so true.
except for the time, I don't know if I've told David this story, where I was accused, I had, on one President's Day, I think I was in the 7th grade, and both my parents worked, so I was home with my younger brother, who's 5 years younger than I, and so I invited two girls to to spend the day. Barbara and Elaine. I remember Elaine's last name. I don't want to say it. Barbara. So they came up and we were 12 years old. I think we looked up some words From Here to Eternity. I had the book. Like, ooh. And so a few days later, the girls get called out of the classroom, and I get called out like a half hour later, and I go to Miss Birnbaum's office. She was she was the assistant principal who used to be an SS training guard in the former life. She was the meanest little runty cockroach too. And she used to go around and put her hand down girls' sweaters to make sure their bra wasn't too tight. She actually did that.
Oh, wow.
So this is true.
There, and the girls are crying, and then I'm told to go in the office, and I open the door, and this is what she says: "Sit down, Preminger." And I said, "No, my name's Preminger." Honest to God. I said, "My name's Preminger." And she goes, "Pimpinger, I know what you are." Now, I never heard the word before. I mean, what the hell's a pimp? I'm 12 years old. She said, "I know you had those girls up in your apartment. I know what you were doing. You were playing Boom or Bust. Remember that game? It was like a Monopoly game."
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
So Boom, and then she emphasized Bust, and I'm sweating. I don't know what the hell's going on. And we're throwing you out of school. You're suspended. Now, it turned out I had been to a party and mentioned the two girls, and some girl was jealous, and her mother called the school and said I was a pimp. So I go running away from the school. My mother worked at Montefiore Hospital about 4 blocks or so from the school. She worked in a big office with other women, and I go running there. I fling open the door, and I yell, "Mom, am I a pimp?" And all these typewriters stopped, like a movie, and everybody looked up. Well, the next day, my parents went to school with me, and we took care of that. My mother told Birnbaum, she said, "If you ever talk to my son like that, again, we're going to sue you, throw you in jail." And my father pounded on the table to Mrs. Thaler, who was the warden of the school. So I had a good, and after that, I was never approached the rest of the time.
Yeah, and
let's ask you about the name. Is there a relation to Otto Preminger?
Oh, it's a long story, and it's not. Yes, my father's grandfather and Otto Preminger's grandfather were brothers, actually.
Oh, so second cousin removed, I guess.
Well, I always joke. I went up to his office, and I was 3 times removed, actually. So, I went to meet him when I was a kid, and he sat in his office with a copy of Variety in front of his face, the trade paper. Never looked up and just said, in his accent, he said, "I don't believe in relatives." And that was the end of the meeting. Nice man. Nice man.
It's not warm.
No, not real warm, no.
No. Wow. That's your Otto Preminger story. Did you stay in New York with your comedy, or did you go work on what they call the road?
Well, I worked on Playboy clubs a lot for number of years. So that was all over the country, which was a great experience, both performing and seeing all these cities around the country and meeting some very nice people, some of them even ladies.
Oh. Ladies. Jerry Lewis.
I never knew their real names, when you're going out after the show with Pepper and Cricket, that's their given names. So,
was it Pepper Martin? But that's a cool.
We've been through Pepper Martin enough to.
I heard at the end of the last.
Yeah. We do go off.
That's called a callback, right, Michael? You're
recall.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, no, they were not built like Pepper Martin.
Thank God.
No, I don't know if they were good fielders.
Michael also, Ralph Michael also was on the Dinah Shore summer show, a TV show in the summer. I remember watching it.
I love Dinah Shore. She, a number of times, had Frank Sinatra on. And you can find it on YouTube, but they have medleys that they do together that are absolutely delightful. That's the only thing. Tell me a Dinah Shore story, if you would, Michael.
Well, I still have a little pendant, so to speak, that she gave to all the regulars on the summer show. It's because the name of the show was Dinah and Her New Best Friends. And so she gave each one of us a pendant, to my new best friend, and it was signed Dinah Shore. She was an absolutely lovely woman. Just the nicest woman I have. I mean, we didn't hang out.
Yeah. But
we dated a few times.
You could tell she was a good person. She wasn't big leaguing you, if you will.
No, she was wonderful. And then the one time, it was an hour show, and it was I think it was 1975, or 76, 76. And so you would take the show, but you didn't know how they would edit it together. And I was working at a hotel, and I told all the people, I'm going to be on Dinah Shore tonight. And they had cut me out of that show. So that was one of my more embarrassing. Was sitting there for an hour, and they're looking at me like, "You're not on the show." I said, "No, I'm on. I said, well, I wasn't on. And so you never know. Embarrassing. But she was a absolutely lovely lady. I opened also for Connie Stevens, and those two women between Dinah Shore were the best people I ever worked with.
My mother has a first cousin, and I know Preminger doesn't do relatives, but his name was Stanley Niss, and he discovered Connie Stevens for Hawaiian Eye. He produced Hawaiian Eye.
Oh, right. Yeah, she's an Italian girl from Brooklyn, right?
She was Cricket, I think on that show they called her Cricket. You mentioned the name as a kind of a nickname.
Oh yeah, no, she wasn't a Cricket on.
Okay,
no, that's just another Cricket. It's just
another Cricket. You got around, Michael. Comedians have no problem. You know why? Because you could open your mouth, and which brings us to the Bronx roots part of it.
Yes,
get to orate with, as a kid, in our community, you were encouraged to express yourself. Am I correct, David?
Mm-hmm.
Or held back, Michael?
No. I mean, that's what you did. I mean, you opened the window and you yelled out the window.
That's right.
That's where. Yeah, I mean that's where the scene came from in what's the movie, the famous movie Network, I think. where
It's all I could stand. I can't stand anymore.
Gene Shepard on his Sunday night show did the same thing. He'd tell people, put your radio against the window and open the window. Just turn the lights off. Yeah, turn the lights off because you don't want to be caught doing this. But turn the lights off and turn the radio up real loud. And he would wait a few seconds, and a little silence there, and then all of a sudden he says, "You're all crazy out there. You're nuts." Yeah. And he would go on, and he called it his invective period. And he would just yell at the neighborhood. And people didn't bat an eye. I mean, they knew. I mean, there was somebody who was upset. We had one family. We lived on the third floor, and this family lived on the first floor. And they had one son, and all they did was yell at this kid. I mean, from with the doors closed, you could hear it 3 stories up. They yelled at this kid from morning till night. And the last time I saw this kid, he was wandering around Greenwich Village barefooted, and probably it was like November or December. And, I mean, he had really gone off the deep end because these two people, his parents, probably never should have been parents. But yelling in the Bronx was as natural as breathing. I mean, that's what you did. I mean, how many times, Michael, did we hear Mrs. Starler yell at the whole school all at once?
Oh my God!
They didn't have a PA system. They didn't have a PA. There was no morning announcements. Pearl Thaler was our principal, and she just opened her principal's door and yelled, and everybody heard it. I mean, it's a true story. There's so many stories about this woman, and in the biopic that they did about Henrietta Birnbaum, the assistant principal, Hugh Cronin played the part of Henrietta Birnbaum because he had been so successful. He'd been so successful playing the warden of the prison that he was typecast. So he was just he wasn't fat enough to play the principal, so they made the movie about Birnbaum. But Pearl Thaler was such an indelible person this is a true story. The very first time I was in Arizona,
you could hear her from the Bronx?
Almost. Across the desert. Just with the tumbleweed tumbling, she came in. No, I'd fallen asleep on the couch. It was the day, I guess, we arrived. I don't remember. But I knew I was in Arizona. And as I'm, when you're sort of half asleep and half not asleep, I think I may have told you this, Mike, years ago. Anyway, I'm hearing, the Parkway, Pearl Thaler, Henry Van Birnbaum, Strickland, and I'm thinking to myself, while I'm half asleep, they're talking about, the old neighborhood. And then I wake up and I realize I'm in Arizona. And I'm watching the Johnny Carson show. I'm not watching it. I'd fallen asleep on it. And there was Robert Klein, one of our other partners in crime from the Parkway, and he's telling this story about how they used to hang out on this fence right in front of the junior high school. And I'm thinking, this is weird. I mean.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, and he had stories. Everybody who went to that school, I mean, even if you walked in and just got a drink of water and walked out, you had a story about this woman because she was indelibly marked on anyone.
One day we were rehearsing for graduation or something, and she sort of tripped, and we all cheered.
Yeah.
She almost killed herself, and we were like giving her a standing ovation.
God forbid on assembly day if a boy didn't come to school in a white shirt, a blue tie, navy blue tie, and navy blue pants, it was like a federal offense. You had to go home and change. And the same thing. Remember with the girls, no tight sweaters, no tight
sweaters,
nothing. I mean. My best job, if they didn't give out awards for this at graduation, but one of my jobs, and this is a true story too, one of my jobs was I was a bathroom monitor.
Oh, God.
And I sat on a chair in front of the boys' room and took names as the boys went into the bathroom because she had a feeling that some of the boys were smoking in there. So after each boy came out, I had to go in and smell the place.
Oh.
And that's a true story.
I'm sorry. Are you okay?
I finally got the smell of smoke at it, and I know nobody's smoking. Nobody's smoking. It wasn't the smell of smoke.
Fine. Nothing to see here.
I mean, this is how crazy this woman was, and her assistant.
I never heard that.
Yeah. And I got that job because I was considered a good boy. They didn't give it to the bad kids.
Did they have crossing guards? My friend Marty was a crossing guard, and he got to leave the room. We were in Queens, but it's basically the same New York City institution. They get the teachers from the same place, and he get to leave class 5-10 minutes early, and I was so frickin' jealous because I had no attention span. Every time the bell rang, it was recess. I'd have a little party in my head just to do something else, but he got to leave early, and to this day, I tell him I was jealous of you then. I'm jealous of what you became now as a result of the discipline. He's lived a good life.
Did we talk about?
You got to wear the sash, the white belt.
The sash, sure.
Right. So.
Did we
I don't remember
how the Bronx got its name?
No.
Yeah, you don't?
I don't.
You can
I don't
tell
remember.
it, David. Go.
Well, first of all, I would say, no, I don't remember, even though we had to cross several streets to get from the apartment building to the school, I don't remember any crossing guards. What I do remember is, in terms of being jealous of kids getting out early, I was very jealous of all the Catholic kids because they got for early release to go to religious school. The Jewish kids had to wait till the regular school was over and then they could go to Hebrew school, which never seemed fair to me because all the Catholic kids, and we had a few of them in there. I mean, this school was this school was like the state of Israel before.
And you can tell from the schmutz on the head when they came in the morning.
Yeah, well, that was the one day a week.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but they would get to leave early and go to catechism or whatever the Catholic schools were teaching them, and we never got an early release. And of course, they did close the schools to the Jewish holidays, but everybody got that off. But
that's true. Same as it was Christmas Day, and they called it Christmas vacation too.
They did. Ralph, you're right. And the funny thing about that, all this talk today about Christmas versus holiday, and I remember, and Michael can back this up. In junior high school over there, we would always have these Christmas assemblies. And we sang every Christian song. Silent Night, Holy Night, all of these songs, they were taught to us. And no one ever thought that there was anything, that we were fostering religion on one another or anything like that. We just did it. It was we were just grateful we were going to get a week off from school.
Right.
And don't you remember singing all those songs in assembly? You don't.
Honestly, don't.
We never put a religious kids don't put a religious connotation to it unless they really have it hammered in their heads by their parents.
Mm-hmm.
But you could avoid it as a kid for a period of time. Of course, there's once you get a certain age and you realize that some kids are going off to shul, some kids are going off to church. Bronx was a million churches. Sunday morning, bong, goyim, you hear the bells, right?
Basketball and I lived near PS 94, so if I wasn't playing basketball at 80, like Christmas Day was the best time because the Jewish kids would have the court for about 3 hours by themselves. So that's one of my favorite holidays.
And you talk about, I remember when, and this really irked me. I was really distraught and pissed off, when they added Under God to the Pledge of Allegiance, because I had just learned the old one. I had learned the whole thing, and now all of a sudden they were changing the words, and I had to learn a whole new Pledge of Allegiance with Under God in there, and it bothered me. Nowadays, there's talk about taking out Under God again, which I'm sort of in favor of because it makes it easy to remember, I think.
Well, anything that blurs the line between church and state is not for me, and that really does.
Agree.
And I think, in my humble opinion, that's what's wrong with this entire world, is that separation of church and state is just not happening.
Yeah, well, more people have died because of religion than any other cause of war. Yeah.
Yep. And we have a crazy man as the president, but let's not forget that if he's impeached, we got Pence in there, who is not only a politician, so he can get stuff done, but he's a real much more of a believer in
religion.
Religion, which is a killer of society. So we have to be careful for what we wish for, but we got to get this guy out of here. One way or the other. He is really off the rails.
One of the things, I had mentioned this, Ralph, on one of the shows, that one of the things about the Bronx, you were either Jewish or Catholic. There were no Protestants. You never knew of a Protestant. I mean, everybody was either Jewish or you were Italian or Irish, and the Italians and Irish were Catholics. And you knew their holidays. We even had one guy, one of the buildings on our street, who would come out every Sunday, go up to the roof, and play his bagpipes. And no, seriously, this guy had played bagpipes. It was, and as far as religion, there was just two, and it was like there were no Protestants anywhere in the Bronx, as far as we could tell, because they just you knew Catholic holiday. You didn't even talk about Christians. You talked about Catholics and Jews. That was
right.
So, explain.
But there was respect. There was more of a respect for
each absolutely. Other. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. For the parents and grandparents, my grandparents lived next door to two women teachers, spinsters, who I think they taught at a Catholic school, but their brother was an actual brother, a priest. Mm-hmm. And I remember I'm a little kid, and this priest passes away, and they had him laid out in the Creed's home right next door, and they kept telling me he's on the couch, he's lying there. It was just a different way of doing things, but we learned about each other. We didn't go, wow, this is wrong. It's just different. And today, it's a right or wrong thing. And I don't know if it's accentuated by the Muslim thing, but I know that over the years, it wasn't that way before. In the days we're talking about, in the 50s, it just wasn't that way. There was a difference, but it was a respected difference.
Well, I'll give you one example. Mike, this was even before you came over in the 7th grade. This was in the 6th grade. I'm sorry, this was in the 7th grade when they brought all the kids from all the other schools in. There was a kid in my 7th grade class who came from Germany, and his father had been a Nazi. Seriously, this is true. His name was Hasso, which is a German name, and he had a picture in his father, he never told us really what happened to his father. Most of us were sort of hoping he'd been shot and killed, but we didn't tell him that. We didn't say that. He showed us a picture of his father in his Nazi uniform.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and here we were,
all survivors of
many, either first or second generation Jews from Eastern Europe, or survivors
and relatives,
and we accepted this kid. We accepted this kid. He was sort of like Skip Homeyer in that movie where the Nazi kid comes to live in the States after the war, and he was fine. There was no problem. I mean, and this is. It was just to this day I remember it because it was such an unusual experience. But nobody, we didn't shun him or isolate him, or he was just one of the kids.
Boy, that's an interesting story. I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
It is. May I ask you a question, Michael? When you were a page at NBC, do you remember that NBC had children's shows, kids shows? Maury Amsterdam did a show, and parents, mine included, with stage aspirations for their kids, would bring them down on a Saturday morning, sit around on the set, and sing little songs and whatever. And they give the kids a bunch of toys, big toys, carton boxes of cars and stuff to take home. And do you remember
I don't
any of that?
remember that. I was a page in the 60s, in the middle 60s.
Oh, okay.
Were you on the show, Ralph? Were you on with Maury Amsterdam?
I was on Maury Amsterdam's show once, and I came in my Cub Scout uniform, and he introduces me, and he says I was supposed to give the Cub Scout pledge. Get up there, and he says, Maury says to me, he says, well, Ralph, I had a little name tag or whatever. He says, I understand you're going to sing a song for us. What are you going to sing? And I said, I wasn't supposed to. So he says, here's Ralph Tyko singing I Wasn't Supposed to.
Oh, that's a great story.
That's a true story. I was
Yeah, right.
To give it a little Jackie Gleason there. A natural Jackie Gleason, like, NBC was the mecca. Of course, there were other networks. There was CBS, but all television, everything originated in New York. People don't realize these shows were, most of them were taped, I guess, kinescoped or whatever.
Yeah.
And they'd go out across the country. But it all started in New York. It was a wonderful place to be, a wonderful place to grow up with a sense of entitlement that your team's going to be in the World Series every year, or at least you're going to see a World Series in your city every year.
Right.
And
that's true.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite things to do on a Saturday or Sunday was to go down to Rockefeller Center, and they let people walk across the set of the Today Show. The Today Show is about 100 years old. I mean, it's like the first show on television practically.
Yeah, started around, 53 or 4?
Yeah, and you could walk across the stage, and there was a camera there, so you could see yourself on television, a monitor, and then there were a couple of monitors facing out where people on the street could see. And I would get on there, and I would do mug shots and, funny little silent bits, what I thought funny little silent bits, until they'd throw me out. And I would do this. I did this any number of times, and they would throw me out each time I did this. So that was my experience with NBC.
That's a microcosm of my life. I would do ... and then they'd throw me out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I hold the record for being thrown out of the Lowe's Paradise movie theater, at least the Bronx record, if not the city record.
Right.
What
did you do?
Well, we used to complain. Lots of times it was just a question of complaining about the movie or making trouble for the manager. I can't remember everything that we did, but I had a friend who had always had passes to that movie theater, so we would go and just for the hell of it, if we didn't like the movie, it would stir up a little aggravation, a little trouble for the matrons, and they'd throw us out. And we said, well, and that was entertainment.
Did they have the usher, the women with the white?
Yeah, the matrons. Yeah.
Yeah, the matrons with the flashlight, like, oh, what are you kids doing? Hey,
yes,
making out, leave us alone.
Yes.
You want to join? I would always invite them to join me, but they never did. So I was just nice that way. It was.
Well, you mentioned the Lowe's Theater. Damn Yankees played at the Lowe's Theater. I guess it was 56 or 57, and I went to that show. I went with my grandmother to see Damn Yankees. I remember like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Great.
That was.
I was just watching Gwen Verdon on the internet, so it was yesterday. It was this morning.
It was. I wonder where her legs go up to Canada even now.
I like that.
It does.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, those were some legs.
She was great. She was great.
All right. Hey, Michael, will you come back? I hope and join us again.
Anytime. I would love it. This was wonderful.
Oh,
hey,
beautiful.
Tell Michael because his son wanted to know when he could hear it. His son has been traveling this week, so wasn't going to be home. Right, Mike? Max was traveling somewhere.
Right.
Well, I'm going to post this. I'm going to post this show today. I will send David a link to it. It's internet radio. You tell your son. And we archive all the shows that we do on YouTube.
And this is the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, is that right?
Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. If you want to just go comfortablyzonedradio.com and you can get to us. We have a number of shows. The one that you're on right now, of course, is Bronx Roots, and David Hubler is the star. I would like to thank you again, Michael, for appearing, and you said you'd be back.
It's been great.
Makes me happy. You said you had fun, too, which is
what we're all great. About. I still want to know about how the Bronx got its name.
Jonah Bronx. He was. They say he was Dutch, but he was Norwegian, and he came over, and he settled. He was one of the first settlers in the Bronx, and of course, they didn't call it that at the time, but he had a big farm there. And when people from other parts of the city, for one reason or another, wanted to visit him, they would say, "Well, we're going to go up to the Bronx." That's true. To the Bronx, and that's a true story. Yeah, that's a true story.
Yeah, I love that. We'll go
Michael, are you on Facebook?
Me, yes.
You are. Well, befriend me through David, and I will send you the link directly.
Yeah. That I don't. I get Facebook. I don't know how to go on it though. Have to get my daughter or something to help me.
Just Ralph, send me the link, and I'll pass it on.
I'll send you the link. You'll get it. You'll get it to Michael.
Okay.
Yeah. Sounds
great.
Beautiful. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's fun for me. That's all I can tell you. I'm going to ask the listening audii the same thing I did earlier today in a show that David appeared on. I'm going to ask them if they would be good enough to box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program wherever you live. There's always a Head Start program. They're always looking for books to get kids interested, to get them school ready, to get them in, by reading you can develop a passion for whatever it is that is going to jump out at you. And you got to have a way to get your noses, if you're a kid out there, out of the devices, out of the games and what have you. Every now and again, read a book. You can't imagine how terrific it is. So and here's a book to read, Gnats and Grays, if you want to read a book.
Yes, wonderful.
Where can that book be obtained? That's your book, David Hubler.
Yeah, The Gnats and the Grays can be ordered and it's now out in paperback, and at a lower price than the hardback, of course, and it's available on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, or you can go into your local bookstore and just order it through the store.
Beautiful. And that's your plug for that. That's what podcast radio is, selfless self-promotion. Michael, is there anything you want to plug, anything you got going?
Yeah, I have a pamphlet out of the days when I was a piccolo player. It's only
okay.
It's 1.5 pages, but it's very enthralling, I think.
Well, every
paperback.
pamphlet has a middle, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and yours does.
So do I.
I'm trying to get us off. I'm trying to get all three of us out the cockers off before the end for any of us.
Okay.
That's true. That's true.
All right. Next week it is. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And audience, I appreciate your listening. Adios.
Take care. Bye-bye. Mike, I'll speak to you again. Bye-bye. Thanks, Michael. Thanks a million. Bye-bye.
Very
Thanks
welcome.
again.
Bye.